My name is Jane, I'm 35, and I'm looking for advice. My husband and I have been married for about 5 years, but we've been together since college. He wasn't exactly keen on marriage, so I had to convince him, which is why we've only been married for a relatively short time. My husband Tom is 34, and we've always got on well, but lately we've been going through a rough patch. Tom recently got promoted at work, which was a fantastic achievement. However, with the promotion came a massive increase in workload. His responsibilities doubled, and although the pay is incredible, it means he's been working far more hours than before. This shift has created a rift between us. Before Tom's promotion, everything before his promotion, things were great between us. Tom's always been a romantic at heart and would do those little things that make me feel loved. We had 2 kids aged 5 and 4, and life was good. Tom made sure we had regular date nights and surprise gestures that helped keep our relationship strong. But after he got promoted, everything changed. His job was a lot more demanding, and although the pay was better, it meant he was working longer hours and dealing with a lot more stress. He tried to make up for it by spending all his free time with the kids so they wouldn't feel his absence. While I appreciated that he was trying to be there for them, it meant that we hardly had any time for ourselves or our date nights. Nights disappeared and I felt increasingly lonely and neglected. It was like our once happy and connected relationship was slowly drifting apart. I knew he was working hard for us, but the lack of attention to our marriage was really starting to hurt. I decided I needed to talk to Tom about how I was feeling. I told him that his new job he said it was affecting our relationship and that he was feeling lonely and neglected. I have to give Tom credit for listening and trying to reassure me. He promised that once he got more used to his new position, his workload would ease up and things would get back to how they were before. He explained that the person who held the job for him had left a huge mess and he was swamped. I tried to be patient and understand, but I was still feeling neglected. I knew he was under a lot of pressure, and I didn't want to add to his stress. Despite my best efforts to be understanding, the situation didn't really improve. On top of everything, Tom's busy schedule meant he was barely around to help out at home. Tasks like cooking were left undone. Cleaning and getting the kids ready for bed were now my responsibility. I was already juggling a lot with the kids, and without his help, it felt like everything was piling up. It was hard to manage it all on my own while trying to keep a positive attitude about his work situation. When my new boss came on board, things started to change. He was everything. Tom wasn't always smooth, charming, and attentive. At first, it seemed harmless. He'd bring me lunch and coffee, and always had something nice to say about my clothes or how I looked. I noticed that whenever he complimented me, it made me feel special and valued. I slowly began to change my own behavior. To keep up with the attention he was giving me, I started dressing better and paying more attention to my makeup, hoping to impress him. I knew deep down that what I was doing was wrong, but I couldn't help it. The attention felt so good after feeling so neglected at home. I knew it was wrong, but my boss's compliments and gestures were a welcome distraction. They gave me a boost of confidence and made me feel noticed, which I hadn't done for months. I knew I was making a mistake, but the emotional validation was hard to resist. I started staying late at work more often, especially on nights I knew my boss would be working late too. At first I told myself it was just about getting extra tasks done, even though deep down I knew it was more about being around him. We began spending more time together chatting about things that were really personal. It felt like we were forming a connection that was more personal. One evening, while we were alone in the office, things took a turn. We had been flirting with each other for so long that we ended up crossing a line. It started with just touching and looking at each other for a bit too long. Before I knew it, we were doing it right there in the office. It felt amazing and intense, but as soon as the excitement wore off, I felt awful. It all felt a bit too much, and I was left with a sinking feeling of guilt and worry. I realized I had made a mess of things, and that I had done the one thing I swore not to do. I felt awful after what happened with my boss. I was so overwhelmed with guilt that I took 3 days off work, pretending to be sick. My husband noticed I was acting strange and asked if something was. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't tell him the truth. How could I admit that I'd cheated? I knew he'd never forgive me. I wanted to come clean, but I was scared of how he'd react, so I stayed silent and avoided talking about it. When I finally went back to work, my boss took advantage of my guilt and confusion. He told me it wasn't my fault. He said it was my husband's fault for being too busy. It seemed like my husband's neglect was the reason I ended up in this mess. I should have seen through his manipulation, but I was desperate for someone to understand and make me feel better. So I ended up continuing the affair with my boss. It started with us secretly meeting, and then it quickly became a full-blown affair. Despite knowing it was a mistake, I felt stuck and unable to break free. I was consumed with guilt, and there were times when I wanted to end the affair, but every time I tried to pull away. My boss would threaten to tell my husband everything. He knew exactly how to keep me trapped, dangling the destruction of my marriage over my head like a sword. Just the thought of my husband finding out made my stomach turn. I knew cheating was a deal-breaker for me. If he ever found out what I'd done, it would be the end of everything we'd built together. Our marriage, our family, it would all be over. I couldn't bear the thought of losing him and breaking up our home, especially not because of a mistake I regretted more than anything. So I felt like I had no choice but to do whatever my boss wanted. It wasn't just the fear of my husband finding out, it was also the fear of what my life would look like if everything fell apart. I was scared, cornered, and felt I was completely powerless in the situation, and my boss knew this. He used it to his advantage to keep me under his control. Every time I thought about breaking free, I would remember his threats, and I would end up complying with his demands. I hated myself for being so weak for letting this man manipulate me. But I felt stuck. The guilt and shame were weighing on me every single day. I couldn't see a way out without destroying everything I cared about. As time went on, my boss started to become more possessive. It was like he seemed to think he owned me or something. His arrogance was growing with each passing day. I could tell he was getting more confident, almost smug about the power he thought he had over me. He knew I was terrified of losing my marriage, and was using that fear to manipulate me even further. He began making stupid demands that went way beyond the affair. He told me not to be intimate with my husband. He wanted me to pull away from him emotionally and physically. He wanted me to be distant to create a wedge between us. It was like he was trying to sever all ties with my husband and exert control over me. Unfortunately, it was working. I found myself pulling away from my husband. I felt so guilty and ashamed of what I was doing that I couldn't even look him in the eye. I started avoiding him, making excuses to not be around. When we were together, I was cold and distant. My husband noticed. Of course he did. He could tell something was wrong. He noticed that I was acting strange, confused and worried all the time, but he didn't push too hard. He probably put it down to his busy schedule and the stress we'd been under since his promotion. Ironically, just as I was pulling away, things at work started to ease up for him. His workload was finally less intense, and he began to have more free time. I could see that he was trying to make an effort to reconnect with me to make up for the time we had lost. He started planning more date nights, wanting to spend more time together and doing he used to do sweet things when we were first married. But instead of being happy about it, I felt trapped. The more he tried to get closer, the more I pushed him away because of the mess I had gotten myself into. Every time he tried to plan something, I felt this deep pit of guilt and fear in my stomach because I knew I was hiding this massive secret from him. Meanwhile, my boss kept pushing me further away from my husband and demanding more of me, which only made things worse. It was a terrible, twisted situation. My boss was being really possessive and arrogant, and it was making everything worse. I felt like I was powerless to stop it. I could see my marriage falling apart, but I didn't know how to fix it without making things worse. Things only got worse. My boss's demands became more frequent and more unreasonable. It felt like every day he was finding new ways to control me to make sure I stayed under his thumb. He would text me constantly, even when I was at home with my family. He also started insisting that I spend even more time with him outside of work. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It felt like he wanted to take over every aspect of my life. I was living in constant fear, always on edge, terrified that my husband would find out what was really going on. The guilt was eating me alive. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't focus on anything, and I started to feel like I was losing myself. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare that I had created and there didn't seem to be a way out. My relationship with my husband continued to deteriorate. He was trying really hard to reconnect with me, but I was too scared and too ashamed to let him in. Every time he tried to get close, I would pull away, make an excuse, or shut down emotionally. I could see how hurt and confused he was. But I didn't know how to explain it without everything coming crashing down at the same time. My boss's behavior was becoming more unpredictable and more aggressive. He started showing up at places where he knew I'd be, even outside of work, just to remind me that he was always watching. He'd make comments about my husband, mocking him, and telling me how much better he was than my husband ever could be. It was like he was trying to completely isolate me from my life, to make sure that he was the only person I had left to rely on. The pressure was unbearable. I was constantly anxious, looking over my shoulder, waiting for the moment when everything would fall apart. I started to withdraw from my friends and family because I didn't want anyone to see how much I was struggling. I knew I needed to do something, but I felt completely powerless. I was too deep in to ever get out, and all the while my husband kept trying to reach out to me to fix what was broken between us. He was planning more date nights and trying to create special moments for us to reconnect, but I couldn't bring myself to enjoy any of it. Every sweet gesture and every kind word just made me feel more trapped. I felt guilty and trapped. It was like I was living a double life. The more I tried to keep everything together, the more it all started to fall apart. I was barely holding on, and I knew that it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down around me. It got to a point where I seriously considered I finally told my husband that I was exhausted, both mentally and physically. I was also emotionally drained from the stress and constant fear of being found out. Every day, I felt like I was sinking deeper into quicksand. I just wanted to be done with my boss and the whole mess I had gotten myself into. I was thinking about ending things with him and telling him to do whatever he wanted, and facing whatever consequences came my way. But in the end, I didn't even have to worry about blowing up my life. My boss did that for me. The breaking point came at a work party that my husband attended with me. I hadn't wanted to go at first. I knew my boss could be unpredictable, and I was nervous about what might happen if we were all in the same room together. My boss insisted I come, practically demanding it. I thought maybe if I brought my husband as my plus one, it would keep things in check. I figured my boss wouldn't try anything stupid. If my husband was there, I would have been more wrong. From the moment we arrived, my boss was on a mission to humiliate my husband. He didn't even try to hide it. He openly mocked him and undermined him in front of everyone. It was like he had some personal vendetta against him, and he didn't care who noticed. My husband tried to be polite at first, laughing off the comments or ignoring them, but it was obvious to everyone that my boss was crossing a line. The whole atmosphere of the party became tense and awkward, with people whispering and giving each other uncomfortable glances. But my boss just kept on going. He'd make these snide remarks and then laugh it off as if it was all just a joke. He'd say things like, "Oh, I'm just kidding, don't be so serious." But it was clear that there was nothing funny about it. I wanted to step in and tell my boss to stop, but I was frozen. Part of me was terrified of what my boss might do. I was torn between standing up to him and feeling like I deserved this, like this was my punishment for everything I had done. But then my husband reached his breaking point after one particularly nasty comment. My husband stood up, his face was flushed with anger, and the room went silent as everyone realized something. I was about to speak up, but my boss smirked. I guess he thought he had the upper hand, but he didn't even see it coming. My husband, who had been trying to stay calm all night, suddenly lost his temper. He swung his fist and hit my boss in the face. The whole room went silent. The room was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. My boss, who was completely caught off guard, stumbled back holding his face where my husband had just punched him. He stood there for a second, looking dazed, while everyone else just stood there, trying to process what had just happened. But my husband wasn't finished. He went after my boss again. My husband was really angry and started hitting him over and over. My boss couldn't defend himself at all because my husband had been holding back for months. I was too shocked to move. I felt like my boss deserved it, but on the other hand, I also felt like he was in the wrong. I knew I'd done the wrong thing, but my boss wasn't innocent either. He'd manipulated me, blackmailed me, and now he was getting what he deserved. I didn't step in, thinking someone else might try to break up the fight or call security. But no one did. It seemed like everyone in the room had decided to let it play out. My boss had been such an arrogant jerk to everyone that no one felt sorry for him. Eventually, my husband stopped standing over my boss, who was now lying on the floor, beaten and humiliated. My husband was breathing heavily, still full of rage. He looked at my boss one last time as if daring him to get up, but my boss, he just lay there, too shocked and hurt to move. Then my husband turned and looked at me. His eyes were full of so much anger and hurt. I knew right then that he had figured everything out without saying a word. My husband walked out of the room. The silence that followed was unbearable. My boss was groaning on the floor, but no one went to help him. He was still lying on the floor, but no one went to help him. It was like everyone had decided he deserved what he got. I stood there for a moment, feeling everyone's eyes on me. I was so embarrassed and full of guilt that I couldn't stand it. I grabbed my bag and rushed out. I had to call an Uber because my husband took the car. I ordered an Uber, and on the way back, I was trying to figure out what I would say to my husband when I finally got home. My husband was waiting for me. He looked surprisingly calm, but that just made me more nervous. I tried to speak to him, to say something, anything, but he cut me off. He told me he was going to bed, and then he just walked away. He went straight to the guest room. He didn't even want to sleep in the same bed as me, which hurt more than anything. I realized then just how badly I had messed up. It's been 3 days since everything blew up, and my husband still hasn't said a single word to me. The silence between us is suffocating, and the tension, and despite his best efforts to keep things normal for the kids, the house is so thick with tension that you could cut it with a knife. They've started picking up on the fact that something's wrong. They're young, but they're not oblivious. I've noticed the way they look at us, confused and worried. It breaks my heart because this is all my fault. I haven't been to work since the party. I didn't even bother to call in sick or officially quit. I just went completely radio silent. I'm pretty sure I've already lost my job, but at this point, I don't even care. I haven't heard a word from my boss either. While part of me is relieved, another part I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. But for now, the fact that he hasn't reached out feels like a small mercy. The worst part is that I haven't said a single word to my husband. I'm too ashamed and too scared to face him. I know I need to say something to try to explain or apologize, but every time I try, I can't even begin to think of how to start. The longer this silence goes on, the more terrified I become. This isn't like him at all. My husband has always been the type of person who deals with problems head on. He's never one to run away or avoid difficult conversations. That's one of the things I've always admired about him. I admire him, especially since I'm the complete opposite. I tend to shy away from conflict, hoping it will just resolve itself, but he's always been direct and decisive. That's why his silence is so unsettling. It's not like him, and it makes me fear the worst. I keep running through all the possible scenarios in my mind. My mind is racing with thoughts of what he's thinking and planning. Is he considering leaving me? Is he trying to figure out how to break it to me? Or is he so hurt that he just doesn't know how to talk to me right now? The uncertainty is driving me crazy. I feel like I'm trapped in a nightmare of my own making. I'm at a loss as to how to resolve this. I'm unsure of what to do, and I'm completely stuck. That's why I'm turning to Reddit for advice. I've never been the type to post my personal problems online, but I'm at a point where I'm desperate for guidance. If anyone has been through something similar, or has any advice on how to handle this, I'd really appreciate it. I know I've made a mistake and I'm prepared to face the consequences, but I just don't know how to take the first step. Update, thanks Reddit. I got flame day. I know what I did was wrong, and I think about it every day. I torture myself over it constantly. I wish I could turn back time, but I can't. Now I have to live with the consequences. So here's the update. After about a week of unbearable silence, my husband and I finally talked. I couldn't take it anymore. The awkwardness, the distance. I cornered him one evening and told him we needed to talk. I explained how horrible I felt, how guilty I was, and how this whole situation, I just wanted to get it all out in the open so that I could finally breathe again. We sat down and had a long, painful conversation. He admitted that he had known about the affair for a while. He had been waiting for me to come clean on my own to tell him the truth, but I never did. He said he knew he was partially to blame for what happened. He took on too much at work and didn't do enough to keep our relationship strong. He acknowledged that the workload he said that the pressure at work had been a strain on our relationship. But he made it clear that it didn't excuse what I did. He said that for a long time he didn't confront me because he didn't know how to. He didn't want to believe it was true, and he was hoping against hope that maybe he was wrong. It was a long conversation, and I can't recount every detail here, but what stood out to me the most was when I asked him if he could ever forgive me. I told him I was willing to do anything to make it right, and to share my location with him at all times. I said I wanted to become a stay-at-home dad. At the moment, it's still under discussion. I asked him to be my home parent so he could monitor me, whatever it took, but he refused. He said the trust was gone, and he didn't think he could ever forgive me, so that's where things stand now. It's over. I'm going to have to move out. I asked him to give me a week to figure things out because right now I feel completely distraught and drained. I half expected this outcome, but that doesn't make it any easier to accept. Update: Hey Reddit, it's me again. I wanted to give you all an update. It's been 2 weeks since my last post, and I finally moved out. I didn't want to update until I had things somewhat settled, so here I am now. Moving out was tough. My husband has been incredibly patient through all of this, never once pressuring me to leave before I was ready. It took me a while to get everything in order, find a place to go, pack up my things, and just emotionally prepare myself for what was coming next. In the end, I had to move back in with my parents before moving out. I had to sit at my desk at work, which was pretty awkward. I dreaded walking into the office, knowing that everyone probably knew what had happened. The first thing I did was meet with my employer to discuss everything. That's when I found out that my boss had been fired. I wasn't surprised, but at the same time, I was the only reason my boss got hired in the first place was nepotism. So, whatever he did, must have really annoyed the higher-ups for them to actually let him go. I'm relieved though. I didn't have to see him again, and I doubt I ever will. After clearing out my desk, my parents came over to help me pack up the rest of my things. Moving out of the home I shared with my husband and kids was the hardest part. The kids are confused, but my husband is doing a great job of explaining things to them. He's been telling them that nothing has to change and that they'll just have 2 homes now, which they seem to be excited about. It breaks my heart a little though. I know I've caused all of this, so now I'm back at my parents' house. They're not happy that I'm back, and I can tell they're really disappointed in me for cheating. Even my friends are disappointed. They've pretty much taken my husband's side in all of this. I couldn't lie to them. My husband insisted we tell them the truth, so that's what we did. As for my husband, he's already working on the divorce papers. He told me that I'll be served soon. I knew this was coming, but it doesn't make it any easier. I guess this is the end of our marriage and it's all my fault. Thanks for all your advice, even the harsh words. I know I messed up, and now I'm living with the consequences. Update: This isn't an update post, so if you're looking for one, you'll have to look elsewhere. I'm sorry, but that's not what this is. I'm just looking for someone to rant to because I just got out of an argument with my parents, and I'm so angry I can hardly see straight. I can't stand how horrible they're being right now. I get it, I messed up. I know I messed up and I'm the one to blame, but can they please stop reminding me of it every single day? I'm already carrying the weight of my mistakes and I don't need them piling on every chance they get. Every time I try to talk to them about how I'm feeling, or just try to get them to ease up a bit, they turn it around on me. It's like, well, you're the one who cheated, not us. They say whatever they want in their house and if you don't like it, you can leave. I don't have anywhere else to go right now, so they're using that against me, and it's driving me crazy. If I could move out instantly, I would. I'm so tired of feeling like a prisoner in my own life, but I don't have the means to just pack up and leave. I need money. Plain and simple. I want to move out, rent an apartment, maybe get a roommate to help with the bills, but I need money to make that happen. I've got some savings, but they're not nearly enough to get me out of here, and finding a job right now is difficult. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. The job market is tough, and I'm feeling the pressure. I'm trying to stay positive, but it's tough when everything around me feels like it's falling apart. My parents are making it worse, and I just feel trapped and helpless. I don't even have any friends to talk to. I guess I can't blame them for siding with my husband. He's the one who got hurt after all, but it still stings. I've lost a lot of the support system I used to have, and it's like I'm going through this on my own. I don't have anyone to talk to who isn't judging me. As for my husband, I don't even know where to begin. He's handling everything with the kids so well, and I'm grateful for that, but it just makes me feel worse. I wish I could turn back time and undo everything and start over, but I know that's not possible. I'm trying to keep it together, but some days it's hard to even get out of bed. I feel so lost. I don't expect sympathy or anything like that. I know I messed up. I did this to myself, and I know I have to deal with the consequences. But I'm human too. I can't keep living like this, being constantly reminded of my mistakes and feeling like I have no way out. I just needed to get this off my chest because I'm so frustrated and I don't know what else to do. Update: it's all so real now. It's like the final nail in the coffin of the life I used to know. I deserve it. I brought this on myself, and there's no one else to blame. Still, the reality of it all hits hard. It's one thing to know that your marriage is over and that you've ruined something so precious. But it's another thing entirely to see it in black and white, to hold those divorce papers and realize this is your new reality. I don't know what's going to happen next. My future feels like a big question mark. It's a scary time. I keep asking myself if I even deserve a future after what I've done. I hurt the person I promised to love and be faithful to. I betrayed my husband, and now I'm facing the consequences. It's just hard to accept that it's really over. I keep thinking about everything that went wrong and knowing it's all my fault. I crossed lines I shouldn't have, and now I'm paying for it. Right now, I just feel lost. What do I do now? How do I start over when everything feels like it's falling apart? I've been trying to avoid facing this, but now that it's here, it's even tougher than I imagined. I know I have to move forward somehow, but I don't know where to start. It feels like everything is broken, and I'm not sure how to fix it. I just needed to get this off my chest. Update: hey Reddit. Many of you suggested looking into online work, which is what I've been doing. The gigs I've picked up don't pay much, but it's better than nothing. At least I have some kind of income, which is better than having no money coming in at all. I'm trying to save up little by little, but I'm still looking for a more stable physical job that pays better. The divorce has been finalized. It was pretty uneventful, to be honest. There wasn't much to fight over. I didn't qualify for spousal support or any kind of financial settlement. And my husband got full custody of the kids, so I'll probably be paying child support once I get a steady job and start earning more. We didn't have any joint assets or anything like that. Everything we owned was either his from before the marriage or mine. Mine, so there wasn't much to divide. He keeps the house and most of our stuff. It was all very straightforward, but it's still the end of my marriage, and I'm struggling to cope with it. It all happened so fast, and now my life feels like it's in ruins. I've lost everything that mattered to me, and I've lost touch with my friends and even my own family. I'm just tired. Tired of the guilt. Tired of feeling like I'm stuck in this mess with no way out. I know I brought this on myself and I'm trying to deal with the consequences, but it's just exhausting. I guess this is my life now. I'm trying to move forward, but it's tough when it feels like everything and everyone is against you. I'm looking for something, some kind of hope, maybe. But right now it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Update: my husband and I have settled into a routine when it comes to the kids. He lets me see them on weekends and whenever I'm free. At first it was awkward. There was a lot of tension and uncomfortable silence, but it's gotten better. We've managed to find a rhythm with Keo parenting. While it's still not easy, it's become more relaxed. I guess we both understand that this is our life now and we have to make it work for the sake of the kids. We've got a long road ahead of us. We're parenting until they're grown, but at least we're managing. I'm still looking for a steady job, but I've been getting more upscale gigs, which has been a big help. It's not exactly stable, but it's better than what I had before. It's allowing me to get by, and I'm grateful for that. My life feels like it's moving in slow motion, though nothing major happens, and I'm just trying to get through each day as it comes. Living with my parents is still tough. They're as difficult as ever. I try to keep my head down and not stir the pot, but it's hard when things are so strained. On a brighter note, my sister recently gave birth, which is a really positive thing. Honestly, I'm just trying to live one day at a time. Things are slow, but I guess that's better than more chaos.